senior speeches. Most of you are here Tuesday, so I'm not going to go through the whole introduction again, but so
visual aids on education.
The greatest source in existence, Wikipedia, states, epistemology is the branch of philosophy that studies knowledge. Epistemologists examine putative sources of knowledge, including perceptual experience, reason, memory, and testimony. They also ask questions about the nature of truth, belief, justification, and rationality. Philosophical skepticism, which raises doubt about some or all claims to knowledge, has been a topic of interest throughout the history of philosophy. To put it more simply, epistemology is why you know. Now, many students find lectures such as that to be boring and mundane and often become easily distracted. They might start drawing on a piece of paper or even on themselves. They might lean over to the friend to tell a joke or ask a stupid question. They may even start throwing things across the room behind the teacher's back without them noticing. However, many tutors here at PEP have learned to combat this by using projectors to help convey information, and our science tutors use experiments to help explain a concept. These are visual aids, which assist with the learning of information. Now, the process of educating and being educated is something that everyone must go through in life. At a very young age, we all are taught how to act and how to behave. We are taught how to use the restroom, how to answer when we are spoken to, how to turn the light off when we leave a room, to respect those that are older than us, to work hard no matter the situation. Now, later in life, as a parent, we then must be the ones doing the teaching. Many people follow this process of educating others as their career in life. These people have brought many improvements to the field, including posters, infographics, and animations. These improvements are known as visual aids. Visual aids help people, not just students, to see what is trying to be conveyed. It would be kind of hard to explain the anatomy of a human or an animal without a diagram to point to and show the location of specific internal organs. Visual aids do not only consist of physical things, however. Many visual aids include things that students can participate in, or things that cause a student to mentally picture something. This process of mentally picturing something is also more simply called mental imagery. All of these improvements have led to what we know in schools today. Tutors accompanying lessons with visual points using projectors or a handout for people to look at themselves. Now, while the Bible does not directly speak on visual aids, Jesus used many things that would be considered visual when he was teaching his lessons. Keeping in mind that his lessons were meant to glorify God, we can learn not only his meaning, but his method as well. Pastors and youth pastors use diagrams to help get the information they are teaching across to their students and congregation. As small as it may seem, a church bulletin with fill in the blanks is also considered a visual aid because it allows people to write down the information for themselves, which helps with remembering that information. Like many teachers, pastors too have found visual aids to be helpful. Youth pastor Jonathan Monk once said, "If you look at the way I use the whiteboard, it's very basic. It's often a T-chart. I'm comparing two things." But what exactly is a mental or physical visual aid? I'll start with what a mental visual aid is. According to an article titled "Why Visual Learning and Teaching," the mental image or representation is defined as what an individual can feel, hear, see, or taste in one's own mind. However, the stimulus which creates the image is not actually seen, heard, felt, or tasted. Basically, a mental visual aid is anything that stimulates an image where one can imagine in their mind what they are thinking of vividly and with detail. A physical visual aid, on the other hand, is something physical that students can participate in or look at that helps them learn, retain, or recall the information. So wait, as far as I can tell, all the tutors here at PEP use visual aids. So why am I talking about them? Well, I feel that oftentimes students, even here at PEP, are unable to keep up with others because they may not be getting to participate in or view as much visuals as they may need. More simply, many students work harder when they have something to look forward to material-wise or when they will be getting to participate in something that will help them learn the lesson. Therefore, in this speech, my plan is to encourage not only the tutors to possibly allow more student participation, but also for the students to, in their homes, incorporate such visual tactics in their learning environments. The biblical worldview that will be applied to my thesis will back up that information with examples of Christians using visual aids to help bring others to Christ. Physical and mental visual aids assist with the learning process and should be utilized in all classroom settings. I'll prove this to be true by answering 3 questions. How the brain is wired towards learning, how experiential learning affects education, and how mental images assist with conceptual understanding. First, however, I would like to lay down a biblical foundation for my argument. In the Bible, Jesus and other teachers used physical and mental images to help convey a lesson. In many instances, Jesus would use a miracle to show examples of God's grace, this being the physical portion of his teaching. In many other cases, Jesus would tell a parable to stimulate in their minds what he was trying to teach. One such example of this would be when Jesus told the parable of the sower to help the apostles see the different ways that the good news would be received. Jesus is the greatest oral teacher in all of history, and he used both physical and mental visual aids in his lessons when he was teaching Israel and abroad. Many of the teachers that would follow would use more mental images because they could not perform miracles. Paul, unable to perform such miracles, taught through his letters or by example. Now, most people today use physical visual aids, but in different forms, still creating mental images in people's minds. On to my first point. The brain is wired towards learning in many different ways. One of these ways is visual analysis. According to research done by Michael Chappell, a writer at eLearning Industry, our brains are tuned to the content of visual information. Over one-third of the human brain is dedicated to analyzing images. It's a process so complex it can't be matched by computers. Because our brains are attuned to the storage and use of visual information, students and teachers alike should be encouraged to incorporate such visual tactics into their learning environments. Another ways our brains are wired to learn is making connections. Joe Bowler, a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Education, once said, "Every time we learn, our brain forms, strengthens, or connects neural pathways. When our brain forms these neural pathways, it means that we learned something new. When it strengthens them, it means that we reaffirm something we knew already. When it connects them, it means that 2 concepts were now realized to be related." Due to how our brain is wired, these visuals stimulate more connections than lectures alone. A final major factor in how our brain is wired to learn is interest. Interest in a subject causes a student's brain to focus on the presented material. Dr. Judy Willis, a neurologist of 15 years, found that when your stress levels are down and your interest is high, the most valuable information tends to pass into your thinking brain. When you are anxious, sad, frustrated, or bored, your brain filters conduct sensory information from the world around you into your reactive brain. These reactive brain systems do one of 3 things with the information: ignore it, fight against it as a negative experience, or avoid it, causing you to daydream. If information gets routed to this reactive brain, it is unlikely that your brain will truly process the information or remember it. This quote gives a clear explanation of how when you are distracted, your brain dismisses any information it finds irrelevant at the given moment. However, when you are interested in the subject at hand, your brain more readily accepts and retains that information. Although our brain may use different methods to learn, there are other ways that our brain works in the education process. Some things we may have learned before without knowing it, as past experiences and experiences found in a classroom are helpful with learning. However, some may argue that the physical visuals in a classroom are actually a detrimental distraction instead of an aid when it comes to learning. Many researchers have performed experiments to determine whether students learn better when there are visual aids in a room or blank walls. A study from the Indiana Resource Center showed that overstimulation is an issue with students who may have autistic spectrum disorder, and recommends that teachers should try to limit auditory and visual distraction so that students can focus on the concepts that are being taught. Overstimulation, however, does not only affect those with a form of autism. Many teachers of young students find it hard to keep their attention. Maps, number lines, shapes, artwork, and other materials tend to cover classroom elementary walls. However, too much of a good thing may end up disrupting attention and learning in young children, according to research published in Psychological Science, a journal for the Association for Psychological Science. Anything that adorns the walls of a classroom can become something that can distract students from the presented material. Now, these arguments do pose valid points against my thesis. However, students and teachers alike will find that learning is most efficient with more than just words. This help is found in the form of visual aids. Surya Hikmat, author of Visual Literacy and Learning, a literature perspective, said that research reported in educational literature suggests that by using visuals in teaching results in a greater degree of learning. By using visuals, teachers are able to get their students to learn the material with a greater degree of interest. The opposing argument states that experiential learning takes away from the deeper intellectual learning. Confucius states, "I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand." Through the experience, the student not only gains a greater understanding of the material, but that learning can extend into their future as well. This leads to my second point. An experience-rich classroom helps students tie what they learn to what they hear, see, or feel. But first, what exactly is experiential learning? Experiential learning is, according to a definition offered by Northern Illinois University, learning through action, learning by doing, learning through experience, and learning through exploration or discovery. Many homeschool students are privileged in that they have had a more experiential learning process than other students. Becky Hollis, my own homeschool mom and teacher, would take us out into the woods when we were doing nature studies. Or when we were learning geography, she would have us listen to culture-related music or would cook us culture-related foods. By immersing the student in what they are learning about, they will not only have more fun in the class, but they will also experience and learn the material better. This experiential learning process requires participation. Thus, students are more inclined to learn when they are allowed to participate. According to an article posted by Northern Illinois University, proponents of experiential learning assert that students will be more motivated to learn when they have a personal stake in the subject, rather than being assigned to review a topic or read a textbook chapter. When a student has a personal stake in the learning process, it means that they get to physically do something. Instead of going back to their room and reading a book of a chapter, or chapter of a book, or going onto Google and looking something up on the internet, they are able to get hands-on experiential knowledge. Experiential learning can also lead to work experience in specific fields. SNHU content writer Joe Coate wrote that a chief benefit of experiential learning is that it helps you gain experience in field before you actually begin your career. That is a vital piece of your academic journey, since the job market you will be entering often expects 1 to 2 years of experience, even for entry-level positions. When looking at colleges, it is a good idea to see if they offer any of these classes with experiential learning. This may be helpful in deciding a future career, because one can gain work experience while still in class. Now, experiential learning, as helpful as it is, may place limits on the amount of students that can participate. Here's where something called mental visualization can be utilized. Yet, experiential learning is another form of education that could possibly be argued against. Richard Hofstadter, a previous professor at Columbia University, wrote that experiential learning takes away from the concept of learning more difficult intellectual skills. He states, "These experiences are, of course, valuable, but they should not be done at the expense of credits that could be devoted to learning difficult intellectual skills within a traditional academic setting." Now, experiences found in a classroom may reinforce a certain point, but it is not helpful when trying to reinforce something that cannot be done with physical experiences. This is where my third point comes in. Mental images help with understanding certain concepts or ideas. Mental images also generate a different kind of experience. In the book, You Are What You Love, James K.A. Smith quotes James Wood, a fellow author. "When we tell a story, although we may hope to teach a lesson, our primary objective is to produce an imaginative experience." This quote states that even if it is just a lecture, oftentimes the tutor is still trying to get the students to mentally experience or see something. This both continues the idea of experiential learning and the idea of mental images in a learning environment. A visual prompt may move or guide a student's understanding from a point of haziness to a point of clarity. Gary Broden, a violinist in the Stockholm Concert Society, records a moment when Arturo Toscanini took great pains to explain what he wanted to create. For example, by letting his handkerchief slowly fall to illustrate the gentle rhythm and character of Debussy's Afternoon of a Faun. The simple act of allowing the handkerchief to gently fall to the ground conveyed how Toscanini wanted the orchestra to play. Back to the brain. God designed the brain to have an entire portion dedicated to the storage of memory. According to research done by Dr. Hajo Hamer, a spokesman for the Epilepsy Center in Germany, when a memory is created, information flows from the cortex, the part of the brain rich in nerve cells, to the hippocampus, the central switching point in the brain for memories. The information flows in the opposite direction when we retrieve a memory. How amazing is it that God gave us an entire portion of our brain dedicated to storing memories? Students utilize this portion best when they're able to mentally picture something and place it into that mental storage unit. Mental images are a great way to illustrate an idea if you can't put it into words. Though many mental images may use physical supplements, learning can't just be visual cues. Jonathan Monk said again, I don't want to be a preacher who just talks at people. I want to be a teacher. A teacher, as we were taught at college, leads people through a passage, helps them along the way, as opposed to just talk. Now, when I started my thesis, I droned on about a topic that probably did not seem to relate to what I was talking about. After I spoke, I presented to you an image that was related to that topic. By a show of hands, how many people remember some of the things that I may have spoken about? Okay, now in contrast, how many people remember the image that appeared? Interesting. A lot of more of you remember the image over some of the things I may have said. This is because you were able to see something out of the ordinary. This is the assistance that physical and mental visual aids bring to a classroom setting. By using physical and mental visual aids, students are able to retain and recall information better than simply hearing words and being told about a subject. These aids can not only help students learn the information, but it can also make the learning fun as well. Students would much rather dissect a frog than simply be told about its internal organs and functions. They want to experience it for themselves. Here at PEP, I believe that there is more that can be done to involve students. We simply have to ask ourselves two questions. What are they? And how can we use them? Thank you. Any questions? Yes. So the question is, what made me choose this topic, and am I myself a visual learner? I am a visual learner. I'm a very mental visual learner. I like to picture things in my mind. But I don't think that's what led me to the subject. I really don't know what led me to the subject. I just kind of picked this and ran with it. Any more questions? Yes. So the question was, does this apply to people that may not be visual learners, correct? Okay. This can apply to people that aren't really visual learners, because everybody has an imagination. So if you can imagine something in your brain, then that helps. And if you can see something, that also helps. Or doing something. Anyone else? Yes, mother.
In your research, did you come across anything that would lead to the way attention spans are decreasing, and that's why more visual aids need to be used?
So the question is, did I come across in my research anything that spoke about a decreased attention span, right? I actually did. There was an experiment some researchers did, determining whether people were more, their attention span either grew or decreased with the addition of visual aids in a classroom. They actually found that their attention span increased when there were legit visual aids, whereas when people were just talking, their attention span decreased and they were actually on their phones more often. Any more questions? Yes. Luke or Thaddeus, one of you speak. Does anybody else have more questions real quick before?
right, you have to take a seat. We're gonna get started.
Our next speaker is Kate Dingfield. She has been going to PEP since Core A and plans on attending FSCJ in the fall. Now everybody, probably going to want to get out of the splash zone because she's about to spill the tea on social media.
I want you to think back to when you were a kid, when the scariest thing in life was when you'd go over to your neighbor's house and knock on the door asking if they'd want to play. When you would climb the tallest tree you could find so you could feel like you're on top of the world. When the worst pain you could possibly imagine was falling off your bike and scraping your knee. Oh, sorry. When the simplest things in life made you happy, whether it was your brother or sister finally sharing those Skittles with you, or maybe you finally find a stranger that'll wave back at you when you violently wave at them in the store. Now, I want you to think about your life now. You go to work or school and you spend what seems like an eternity there. Then later in the day, you come home, you go in your room, and you lay in your bed, and you play on your phone with the only light in the room being your phone screen shining on your face. You are absolutely terrified of being judged by others, so you only act a certain way and only wear certain things whenever you go out in public. You turn to your favorite social media apps to try and find that happiness you once felt as a kid, but nothing seems to be the same. What if I told you that the very thing that you turn to find that happiness you once felt as a kid is the very thing that took it from you in the first place? Would you believe me? The social media craze took the world by storm in 1997 when 6degrees.com was released to the public. It was the first of its kind, and everyone wanted a taste of it, especially the teenagers. The next sites to take over the world were Friendster, MySpace, LinkedIn, and Facebook. These sites were so popular that everyone around the world had an account on at least one of them. Now that in today's world, the list of different types of social networking sites is endless, with TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram being some of the more popular ones. Now that teens are able to download social media on their phones, it's nearly impossible for them to take their eyes off of it. Having easy access to social media is more dangerous and life-altering than one would think. Teens claim that these apps are what make them happy and what keep them in check with the world around them, when in reality it's what took that happiness away from them in the first place and replaced it with new insecurities and addictions. The term social media is used to describe social networking sites that were originally created with the purpose of allowing teens to stay in touch with each other, while also connecting with their generation. A once innocent concept has now turned into a destructive platform that can change a teen's life in seconds. A recent study done by Brian Dean states there are roughly 4 billion active users on social media. On average, each user has around 8 or 9 accounts stretched across all platforms. With teens having multiple social media accounts, spending an estimated time of 5 or 6 hours a day on social media does not seem bad at all, until you think about what they could be doing instead. Teens choose to waste their days away on social media rather than doing more productive things like doing their homework, spending time with family and friends, and even exercising. For most teens, social media is a place to keep up with trends, find security, stay in touch with each other, and also make new friends. Some teens also see social media as a place where their voice is heard and where their opinions matter. For the few who have witnessed the destruction that social media can have, they see it as a place where teens are drawn in and form new addictions to these sites. They also see it as a place where teens go in with confidence through the roof and a personality that differs from others around them, and come out with little to no confidence and acting the same as everyone else in the world. Social media is like a danger hidden in plain sight. To most, it is seen as a place to feel connected with the world and a safe place to turn to, but the truth about social media is that it's a place filled with cyberbullying where everyone obtains new insecurities once they join in on the trends. It's a place where teens are drawn in with catchy songs and funny memes and come to find themselves in an endless loop watching the same thing over and over and over again. Social media seems like a place where teens are safe from the harsh world, but in reality, it's even more cruel. The overuse of social media by teenagers creates a negative cycle that causes depression, feeds addiction, steals confidence, and promotes laziness. Today, I will address both the positives and the negatives, showing that the negatives far outweigh the positives in regards to physical and mental health. By the end of my speech, I'm hoping to have brought into light the things that social media can do to one's mental and physical health, as well as inspire some of you to consider cutting back on your social media usage and use that spare time more productively. Most of you are probably thinking, I already hear enough of this from my parents at home, or maybe you're thinking, I already know I should get off my phone and go do more productive things. I thought the same exact thing when I started my research for my paper. But soon after starting my research, I was completely caught off guard by how much new information I was learning. I now personally like to think of social media as two-faced, or in other words, a split personality. If you look at social media as a whole, you can clearly see that there are good things about it as well as bad things. But no matter the case, one side always outweighs the other. Anywhere you travel to nowadays, you're bound to run into teens who can't get their noses out of their phones. Most of these teens are the same ones who will argue with you for an eternity to try and convince you that social media is a must-have in order for them to get through their day. I'll be the first to admit it, they do put up a pretty good argument, but who knows, that may just be their addiction talking. Through the apps social media have come to love, they're able to call and video chat all their friends and family from anywhere around the world at any time they please. Without social media in the picture, staying in touch with each other would be a nightmare, almost as if they'd be better off not even trying. In addition, social media provides teens with a new way to make friends. With just a click of a button, two people who have never met before could be talking via video chat. Vishal Bojin states in his article titled Positive Effects of Social Media on Youth that social applications are playing an extensive role in terms of linking people. It gives a platform for those who can't travel and find it inconvenient to move out to meet people. Different apps, for example, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, Skype, and Instagram have been introduced for this purpose. Now that people do not need to spend money and travel to meet people physically, they can meet their dears and loved ones just by making video calls. Social media provides teens all over the world with the ability to connect with anyone at any time they please. Although it may not seem possible, social media also has the ability to keep teens aware with what's going on in the world around them. Majority of teens do not take the time out of the day to watch the news. Instead, they would rather scroll on their favorite social media platforms and spend all their time laying in their bed playing on their phone. What is often forgotten about is that a large amount of people actually use social media as a way to spread awareness for the sensitive topics in the world. The website shadownet.com reports that social media raises awareness in the youth regarding sensitive issues that are not discussed in many societies. It raises the consciousness of hardships that people in different societies face. It creates political and social awareness and provides information of how to access support in case a certain situation arises. Social media is a great tool for spreading awareness as well as educating people on sensitive topics. These social networking apps teens have come to love have the ability to be a positive light in their lives. With easy communication and spreading awareness, social media is nearly irresistible. Although social media has done a tremendous amount of positive things for the younger generation, the negative things it has done does pack a punch. Depression is a big deal in the world today. Although they won't admit it, most teens have experienced depression at some point in their life. Gen Z claims that social media is the main source of their happiness, when in reality, it's what took it away from them in the first place. Rather than being a place to find joy, social media is a huge source of depression in today's society. A 2018 study by Jamison Monroe states that 14 to 17-year-olds who use social media 7 hours per day are more than twice as likely to have been diagnosed with depression, treated by a mental health professional, or taken medication for a psychological or behavioral issue during the last year. This is compared to those who use screens for only about an hour a day. Depression rates in teens have the tendency to skyrocket at any given time. Not only has depression been a rising problem, but suicidal thoughts and actions have also taken a toll on the generation. An article written by Ray Jacobson says, several students who have died from suicide have projected a perfect image on social media, their feeds packed with inspirational quotes and filtered images showing attractive, happy kids who seem to excel with minimal effort. But behind the digital curtain, they are struggling emotionally. Social media has given teens the ability to portray any image they please for the world to see. They could be struggling with suicidal thoughts and we would never even know it. A lesser known but equally as destructive form of depression is FOMO, or fear of missing out. Teens scroll through their favorite social media apps and find their friends hanging out without them and experience FOMO on a day-to-day basis. Clinical psychologist Jerry Brubrick claims that FOMO is really the fear of not being connected with our social world, and that need to feel connected sometimes trumps whatever's going on in the actual situation we're in. The more we use social media, the less we think about being present in the moment. FOMO is a real thing that teens face every single day. It not only makes them feel like outsiders, but it also disconnects them from the real world. But it also has teens resulting to spending an overabundance of time in the room alone with the very thing that started their downfall into depression. Every day, more and more teens are sucked into an addictive daily life cycle and spare every minute that they have on social media. What people fail to realize is just how hard it is to be set free from this destructive cycle. An article by Science Focus reads, the question of whether we can be addicted to our phones in the same way that we can be addicted to substances such as alcohol and drugs is controversial, but there's no denying the dopamine system is involved. Every time we check our social media feeds and find something novel or exciting waiting for us, our brains release dopamine, which tells our brains that social media is worth doing again. With social media and drug addiction being the same part of the brain, it's easier to see just how difficult it is to break free from this destructive life cycle. Being addicted to social media can do more than just create a nearly unbreakable cycle. Losing good relationships over social media addiction is something that happens to teens daily. The website Mind Body Gree reminds readers that attempting to measure up to what you see on social media can distract you and your partner from the relationship. Inevitably, real life won't look like the endless highlight reels we see on social media, which can lead to disappointment in either yourself, your partner, or both. Spending a large amount of time of your day on social media can give you unrealistic expectations for your relationships. When your significant other or your friend does not meet the unrealistic standards you've set before the relationship has even started, it can lead to dissatisfaction, which can lead to arguments and can ultimately lead to a breakup or a loss of a friend. Being stuck in an addictive loop can also shorten a teen's attention span and make school and doing homework harder and harder to do and less of a priority in their life. According to Jamison Monroe, many experts believe that the constant overstimulation of social networking shifts the nervous system into fight or flight mode. As a result, this makes disorders such as ADHD, teen depression, oppositional defiant disorder, and teen anxiety worse. An addiction to social media can almost always lead to a shortened attention span. Having such a powerful addictions to these apps can not only lead to an ending of relationships and having a shorter attention span, but it can also be the start of a long, sad journey with no one around to fill the air with laughter. Confidence is something that teens can lose very quickly. It's usually very easy to tell how much time a teenager spends on social media by how much confidence they have. Those who rely on social media and spend most of their day on social media platforms tend to compare themselves to what they see. A recent study testing whether the majority of women are more likely to focus on their outer appearance rather than their inner appearance shows that women who'd seen the body positive photos still ended up objectifying themselves, measured when, after looking at the images, the participants were asked to write 10 statements about themselves. The more the statements focused on their appearance rather than their skills or personality, the higher the participants scored on self-objectification. The results of the study showed that women are comparing themselves to other people that they see on social media and are forgetting that it's what's on the inside that counts, not on the outside. The unhealthy habit of comparing yourself to others can lead to new insecurities. Every day, more and more teens get caught into the trap of comparing themselves and are escaping with new insecurities that change the way that they live life. For some teens, having that picture-perfect appearance is a main priority in life. They will spend hours and hours trying to get that perfect angle and then spend an equal amount of time on their editing apps to try and make it look absolutely perfect. A recent study done by Jennifer Mills, an associate professor at York University, asked female undergraduates to take a selfie on an iPad and upload it to either Facebook or Instagram. One group could only take a single picture and upload it without editing, but the other had a chance to take as many as they wanted and retouch their selfie using an app. Mills and her colleagues found that all the selfie takers felt less attractive and less confident after posting than when they had walked into the experiment, even those who had been allowed to edit their photos to their heart's content. Even after spending all that time taking and editing pictures, teens still feel the same way that they would if they had only even taken one. Confidence is something that most teens will take for granted, but the moment that they lose it, they'll think about how much easier life was when they still had it. Something that most people do not pair with social media usage is laziness. Social media provides teens with a platform that is addicting, so addicting that they want to spend all day laying in their bed, scrolling on their feed. In an interview with John Adams, a high school leader here at CFC, I asked him how he had seen social media change people. He replied saying, "With Instagram, I didn't see much change because it was a natural branch from Facebook. Snapchat created a wild change with people getting offended when they lose their streak. People also seem to get offended or hurt when their friends turn off their Snap locations. But with TikTok, people zone out in TikTok land and scroll through videos for an eternity and don't even realize it. Social media as a whole has made it easy for teens to waste their days away, not get anything productive done, and has created an addiction to laziness." The overuse of social media amongst teens starts the unhealthy habit of laziness and is nearly impossible to break free from. Laziness also prevents teens from sharing the gospel with unbelievers. Lazy teens would rather spend their days laying around doing nothing rather than doing what Christ had commanded us to do, go out and share his word with unbelievers. Matthew 28:18-20 says, "Then Jesus came to them. He said, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So you must go and make disciples of all nations. Baptize them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Teach them to obey everything I have commanded you, and you can be sure that I am always with you till the very end. Christ has commanded us to go out and share the good news with others, but it's hard to do so when we want to stay in bed all day and play on our phones. This addiction to laziness can sometimes go stronger and stronger in teens, so much that it prevents us from doing things that are needed to stay healthy and in shape. Teens saw this problem and took it to social media and started the body positivity trend. This trend started out as a good thing and reminding people that all bodies are beautiful, but it was quickly taken advantage of and is now used as an excuse for obesity. Instead of working at it and changing their unhealthy lifestyles, people would use the body positivity trend as an excuse to keep living the life that they have and living with the same habits that got them there in the first place. 1 Corinthians 6, 9-20 states, "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God, that you are not your own? For you have been bought for a price, therefore glorify God in your body." Our bodies are temples of God, and we need to be glorifying Him in them. But it's difficult to do so when we aren't living healthy lifestyles. Social media has created an easy way for us to fall into the trap of laziness. Once there, it seems nearly impossible to escape from. Social media can greatly influence a teen's struggles with depression, addiction, confidence, and laziness. It can be a great danger in someone's life, but it also has the ability to be a light. Spending less time on social media is a guaranteed way for it to be a light, but if you use the light too much, it'll burn out and it'll leave you in darkness. I hope that I've inspired some of you to cut back on your social media usage and take some time to reconnect with the outside world outside of social media. Taking that step back is the only way to truly feel like that carefree kid you once were. Instead of posting on social media about how much easier life was when you didn't care what anyone thought about you and where your insecurities were nowhere in sight, you could be living that life you once had and missed so deeply. If you didn't take anything away from my speech, I ask that you would at least consider the things that social media can do for you and ask yourself, is it worth it? Thank you. Any questions? Yes. So the question asked is, do I think that there's any way that we can still use social media but not be addicted to it? Yes, I do. I don't think that social media as a whole is bad. I just think the overuse of social media can be very bad. So one way that you could definitely make sure that you don't overuse it is screen time. I know a lot of you probably have your parents putting that on your phones already, but that's a really good way to make sure that you're not spending too much time on it because it'll cut you off after a certain time. Does that answer your question? All right. Yes.
Are there certain apps, like social media apps, that you find are worse off than others?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Are there like certain social medias that could lead to more of the negative effects?
Okay. So the question asked is, do I think that there's any social media apps that are more addicting than others? Right? Okay. Definitely yes. I think that TikTok is probably one of the most addicting apps. I mean, I probably think that most of us in here probably spend a lot of time on TikTok. But like things like Pinterest, I don't think are as addicting. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay.
Online question from Melissa Casabon. So she asks, why do you think so many parents are okay with letting their children have social media apps, even though we know all the risks you shared are real, and even though they affect us as adults? Would you say these parents are bad parents?
Good question. The question asked is, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
So why do you think parents let their children use these apps even though they know the risks? And do you think these
Okay.
parents are bad parents?
Okay, good question. Okay, so the question asked is, why do I think that parents let their kids use social media even though it's bad? And do I think these parents are bad parents? I definitely do not think these parents are bad parents. I think that parents are letting their teens use social media because it's a good way to connect with others. Like there's a lot of people that I personally stay in touch with usually over social media. But I think it becomes a problem when we spend all of our time on there and we make stuff like reading our Bible and doing our homework and spending time with family like second priority to social media.
I'm sure they.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yes, Damon.
How did your research change your own usage of social media?
Good question. The question asked is, how did my research change my use of social media? Sorry. Well, at first I didn't really spend a lot of time on social media because my mom put screen time on my phone, so I was already limited to my social media usage. But after like seeing how much social media can like really do to you and how much of like damage it can do, I was really taken back and was like, oh, I should probably get off my phone. And now I don't spend a lot of time on my phone. Does that answer your question? Oh. Yeah, Dad. Oh, great.
The presentation sounded like you were saying that you're going to get off your phone more and interact with your family members.
Good question, Dad. The question asked is if I'm going to get off my phone and spend more time with family. Usually when I'm in my room, I'm asleep and not on my phone. So sure. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes.
So would you say that the direct addiction is to social media or lazy?
Good question. The question asked is, do I think that the addiction is to social media or to laziness? Is that a question? Okay. I think that the addiction starts with social media because social media is something that we can scroll on for hours and hours and hours. Like I have personally found myself before my mom put screen time on my phone, laying in my bed, scrolling on TikTok for hours and not even doing my homework or anything. So I think that the addiction starts with social media and then it can lead to laziness. So both. All right. Good question. Do you have a question?
Do you think social media is connected to teens wanting to check their phone while they're driving and look at their phone while they're driving?
That's a really good question. The question asked is, do I think that social media is connected with teens wanting to go on their phones while they're driving? Definitely yes. I know that social media, I mean, from personal experience, I have caught myself checking my phone on social media while I was driving and not even realizing it. So teens will say that they're changing their music, but they're probably on social media. So yeah, good question. Anyone else? Oh, yes. Good question. So the question asked is, how do I think this ties with adults? I think that adults are prone to going on social media to have a way to connect with their teenagers. Because, I mean, if you really think about it, time when, like, for example, when my parents are my age and now there's a lot of different things. And I think that parents will go on social media to find a way to connect with their kids. So then they have something to talk about other than just school and work and chores. Yeah. Good question. Yes.
So would you say that the only way to combat the negative effects is to decrease time on there, or would you say that there's other ways?
Good question. That question asked is, do I think that there's other things we can do other than just taking time away from social media, right? There are. I think one of the biggest ones is definitely taking time away, but I think that you have to start with taking time away because that's really the only true way to get off of it. But after that, I feel like there's other things that you can do. Because like trying to get off of social media, I feel like that starts with getting off of social media. So yeah, I mean, like you could do stuff as little as like going on a walk, petting your dog, stuff like that. But it all starts with taking time off the phone. All right, one more question. Yes.
So, from a biblical perspective, this is a very interesting topic. And my question would be, when we're talking about addiction or enslavement, are we enslaved to the media or are we enslaved to what the media does for us?
Very good question. The question asked is, do I think that we are enslaved to social media or enslaved to the stuff that social media has for us, right?
Yeah, or does for us. What
Or
we
does for
get
us,
from it.
yeah. I feel like it's kind of both because social media can give you kind of like that feeling of like being connected and feeling wanted. Sometimes you can't really find that when you're with people because you could be like in a crowd of people and you wouldn't know anyone. You'd feel disconnected. So I feel like social media is a way that we can feel connected. So it does give us stuff that we're addicted to, but I also think that we're just addicted to the idea of being on social media. Because social media is such like a big thing in the world today that everyone has it, and just being able to say that you're on social media can do a lot. Good question. All right, 5-minute break. Okay, our next speaker is Rutledge Feltel. He has been at Pep since Core A. He plans on going to Wheaton College to play baseball, major in woman, and minor in pre-med. Give it up for Rutledge with ADHD, mistreated, and misunderstood.
Classic classroom setting. Couple buddies sitting next to you, your crush across the room. There's the weird kid over there fidgeting in the corner, clicking his pen at a rate of exactly 427 times a minute. The class clown has fallen asleep, and your teacher is straight out of Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. However, out of that mess, you make out these two words. Group project. Finally. Just as you're about to call the boys, Brad, Chad, and Thad on over to partner up, you hear these ghastly words escape that monotonous mouthful. But I am picking your partners. Defeated by the dread teacher once again. You know she'll never put you with your friends. She claims you're a bad influence on your academic success. Ooh. So she begins to read off a list of names. Brad, Chad, and Thad are put with your crush. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, you hear your name rattled off along with the fidgeter and the clown. At least there'll be some comic relief. Now fast forward to the night of the due date, and you're pulling your hair out trying to get these men to pay attention. Sorry, I forgot my pills today, says the fidgeter, while the clown blurts out the worst jokes at the most random opportunities. Finally, you just send them home with instructions to just do the presentation in the morning. You resolve yourself to an all-nighter, fueled by caffeine and sheer will. If they couldn't pay attention, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. Why couldn't they just focus? Now, new diseases and disorders are discovered every year. And it's no, and 2020 is a prime example of the immediate impacts that they can have on a population. It's not surprising that children have always known to be squirmy, starry-eyed, living in their own little universe. However, these behaviors manifested in some far more than others, to the point where they became a medical anomaly. One of the first recognized references to ADHD-type behavior was in Heinrich Hoffmann's poem, The Story of Fidgety Philip. This excerpt reads, "But Fidgety Phil, he won't sit still. He wriggles and giggles, and then I declare, swings backwards and forwards and tilts up his chair." Know anybody like that? Now, one of the first examples of the medicalization of ADHD seems to have been in 1902, when English pediatrician George Still first theorized that children who might otherwise be labeled as miscreants, intellectually incapable, or simple daydreamers might actually have a brain disorder, now known as ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Today, over 10% of school-age children and young adults meet the criteria and are diagnosed with ADHD. Now, the existence of ADHD should not be a thing that has to be argued. However, too often parents are willing to chalk up their child's behavior to simple disobedience or laziness. These parents may refuse doctor's visits or treatment options, especially prescription medication. Now, because it's a real issue, today I will be discussing the arguments against the existence of ADHD and how so often many of these arguments stem from a fear of the prescription medications used to treat the disorder. According to the DSM, ADHD is classified as a mental and learning disorder. As such, it can and will have detrimental impacts on a child if left untreated. In 2003, there were an estimated 4.4 million cases of ADHD. By 2013, that number had risen to 6.4 million. There's almost a 50% increase in diagnoses in just 10 years, and these numbers are steadily rising. Now, before I begin my arguments, it's necessary to clarify some terms. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder defined by the NIH, or the National Institute of Health, as a disorder marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity or impulsivity that interferes with function or development. Contrary to popular belief, instead of the ADHD brain being one that is overactive and overstimulated, it is actually believed that it is inactive and understimulated parts of the brain that cause ADHD-type behavior. Now, I'll be discussing a few treatment options today. For the purposes of this speech, prescription medication refers to short and long-acting stimulants such as amphetamines and methylphenidates. Behavioral therapy is a series of sessions or classes with a trained psychiatrist aimed at modifying a child's behavior. Biblical counseling seeks to accomplish the same thing, albeit with the goal to glorify God by bringing the child closer to Him. Finally, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, 5th edition. Now, public perception of ADHD raises the questions. How serious is ADHD really, and why is it important to me? Now, long-term struggles of untreated ADHD are frightening, and problems that patients may face include substance addiction, obesity, antisocial behavior, occupational problems, and academic challenges, among a myriad of others. While most adolescents do not actually have ADHD, American youth is more distracted than ever. Experts indicate that the prevalence rate for ADHD may now be above 15% for both those diagnosed and undiagnosed. Comorbid disorders, such as obsessive defiance disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and depression, exist in as many as 69% of ADHD cases. As such, it is vitally important that everyone understand and be able to interact with ADHD when they eventually encounter it in their lives. Now, even those who deny the existence of ADHD on principle can still agree that there's much to be done for students who struggle with learning disorders. Some of the possibilities include behavioral therapy, biblical counseling, and prescription medication. The question of how a society should treat those with ADHD will continue to gain prevalence as rates of diagnoses continue to rise. And the short answer is that it necessitates action. After all, what would you do if you, your friend, your brother, your sister, your classmate, or even your own child had ADHD? Now, today I will be discussing the alarming rise in ADHD diagnoses and lack of general knowledge surrounding the disorder. I will show how ADHD is often diagnosed and how prescription abuse has delegitimized the disorder. Finally, I'll discuss how we as Christians can be prepared to respond to ADHD through biblical counseling, behavioral therapy, and prescription medications. While ADHD is often misunderstood and mistreated, it is our duty as Christians to combat and understand this unheralded disorder. Now, recent years indicate flaws in the diagnostic procedure. Dr. Richard Saul notes that over my 50-year career in behavioral neurology and treating patients with ADHD, it's been in the last decade that I've seen rates of diagnoses truly skyrocket. Now, this rise in diagnoses indicates a growingly distracted and compulsive youth and also issues with the diagnostic procedure. I will be discussing the issues with the diagnostic procedure as it's flawed at the core. According to the CDC website, deciding if a child has ADHD is a process with several steps, and there's no one single test to diagnose ADHD. Many other problems such as anxiety, depression, sleeping disorders, and learning disorders can have similar symptoms. One now only has to meet 6 of the 18 symptoms outlined in the DSM-5 to be qualified for a medical diagnosis. Some of the symptoms that a patient and parent will discuss with a pediatrician upon a doctor's visit include: is a child often not following through on duties on instructions, or fail to finish their schoolwork? Do they fail in their duties in the workplace? Are they losing focus? Are they sidetracked? Are they often easily distracted? Are they often forgetful in their daily activities? Do they often interrupt or intrude upon others? Do they often fidget or tap with their hands or squirm in their seat? Now, because of these questions, subjectivity interpretations vary. What might often could mean 20 times a day to one family, whereas it might mean 3 times a week to another. Unfortunately, with no known unbiased test to diagnose ADHD, it becomes easy to gain a misdiagnosis. In fact, ADHD may mistakenly be used now as a fallback diagnosis for doctors whose patients are presenting unusual levels of impulsivity, distraction, and inattention. This is where mistreatment can occur. According to Dr. Richard Saul, he's seeing a growing number of patients claiming these symptoms. A panel of doctors led by Dr. Michael J. Manos of the Cleveland Clinics conducted a study and published an article surrounding the treatment and diagnostic procedures of ADHD, citing that more than 1 in 10 or 11% of school-age children now meet the criteria for diagnosis of ADHD. Among adolescents, 1 in 5 high school boys and 1 in 11 high school girls now meet the criteria for diagnosis. Data collected on a patient, these same doctors found that in a study of 50 pediatric practices, only half of clinicians actually followed the diagnostic guidelines of at least 2 sources across 2 settings, spanning a period of at least 6 months. Yet nearly all, or 93%, reported immediately prescribing treatment or medication for treatment. Data collected on a patient should come from an unbiased source, or from a parent and at least one other unbiased source who has regular interaction with the child. These guidelines are in place to prevent a misdiagnosis, making the tests and questions more objective rather than subjective. If testimony is not collected, then a misdiagnosis may occur. However, when testimony is collected from the correct sources, there's an exponentially higher rate of correct diagnoses. As a result of the rising rates of ADHD and possible misdiagnoses, this disorder is further clouded by children's natural tendency towards sin and is delegitimized by prescription abuse. In an attempt to biblically parent hyperactive children, some Christians may discredit ADHD altogether, claiming the problems lie solely within a child's sinful actions such as disobedience, defiance, impulsivity, inattention, etc. This misunderstanding can have detrimental impacts on a child. Doctors David M. Tyler and Kurt P. Grady co-authored the book ADHD, Deceptive Diagnosis, in which they state that perhaps the situation the child is in has more to do with it than an unsubstantiated disease, and that the ADHD label needs to be demystified and replaced with biblical language. It's time to teach parents to think biblically and not psychologically about inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Now, while biblical training about anything is God glorifying, these authors are denying ADHD's existence not based on their beliefs about the Bible or God. They deny it based on their beliefs about Big Pharma. They show this when they say that they, or Big Pharma, are creating so-called diseases to treat with their newest drugs, while the world is still battling cancer, AIDS, heart disease, killer bacteria, and viruses, and a host of other real diseases. Then again, it is much easier to cure it is much harder to cure a documented disease than it is to create one to fit a drug already in the company's pipeline. Claiming ADHD was created by Big Pharma to sell prescriptions parallels saying COVID-19 was created by Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson to sell vaccines. It simply doesn't make sense. Now, another belief is that ADHD is merely an encompassing term for a myriad of other disorders. As Dr. Richard Saul writes in his article titled ADHD Does Not Exist, what I deny is the generally accepted definition of ADHD. In short, I've come to believe over my decades of practice treating patients with ADHD that, as currently defined by the DSM and as understood in public imagination, does not exist. Now, what Dr. Saul is not denying the existence of ADHD. He is simply protesting how it is defined. He further goes on to say that many people exhibit a normal level of distraction and inattention, or that they have another disorder altogether that needs to be treated entirely. He views ADHD as a generic term used by doctors as a cop-out. Now, with the rising rates of ADHD diagnoses and possible misdiagnoses, and also the rising rates of prescribed medications, this is actually pretty understandable. However, I don't believe it tells the whole story. While it's true that the DSM could have more specific diagnostic guidelines, denying ADHD's existence is not the answer. Understanding some of the causes of ADHD would lend it legitimacy. According to the CDC's special research group centered on attention deficit disorders, scientists have discovered a strong genetic link since ADHD is strongly inherited. According to over 20 genetic studies, there's strong evidence that ADHD is passed down genetically. For example, in 2001, there were 4 genes found relating to ADHD. By 2017, there were 29 genes found relating to ADHD. This is a 725% increase in just 16 years of research. Further, Dr. Daniel Amen of the Amen Clinics uses advanced imaging technology to show the stark difference between the brain function of someone with ADHD and the brain function of a normally functioning brain. Holes in the diagram indicate a lack of proper function. This is the brain scan of a normally functioning brain. This is the brain scan of someone with ADHD. See the differences? Dr. Saul agrees that denying those presenting symptoms is simply unacceptable when he later says it's time to rethink our understanding of this disorder and offer more thorough diagnostic work to help people get the right treatment for attention deficit and hyperactivity. While Saul advocates rethinking, he does not in any way advocate denial. He recognizes that bickering about labels will not resolve anyone's symptoms. Now, as students transition from high school to college, many will struggle to cope with the new rigors of higher academics. They may search for a panacea, something to help them gain an edge in the classroom or focus better while studying. A group of researchers at Ohio Northern University, led by Adam Trimble, found that 9.3% of students had illegally used prescription stimulants in their lifetime, those used to treat ADHD such as amphetamine or methylphenidate. Additionally, 7.3% had used within 30 days of the study, and finally, prevalence rates on a single college campus were found to be as high as 34%. Because ADHD medications are a Class II prescription drug, their distribution is highly regulated and resale is a criminal offense. These students could be facing both expulsion from college and criminal charges. While students should absolutely strive for academic success, illegally taking ADHD medication removes the equalizer meant only for those who need it. Now that we have established that ADHD does in fact exist, that it is a problem, and if left untreated, it is serious, the final questions are raised. What should be done about it? With percentages rising, ADHD will eventually affect us each in some capacity. And as Christians, we are called to carry our brother's burdens. We should thus be equipped to do so. There's no one-size-fits-all way to treat ADHD. However, proper use of the treatment toolbox will help resolve symptoms. First, medication provides an effective relief of symptoms. First, medication provides effective relief of most symptoms and is recommended by the DSM as first-line treatment. In a double-blind crossover study to determine the effectiveness of ADHD medication, the National Institute of Health found that the initial stimulant response rate was as high as 85% if trials of both methylphenidate and amphetamine were used. Additionally, the data indicated an excellent safety profile. Obviously, stimulant medication is incredibly effective in treating ADHD. However, they cannot be taken 24 hours a day. And as the adage goes, pills do not teach skills. Therefore, Dr. Manos concludes that the addition of behavioral intervention enhances stimulant performance to improve compliance, on-task behavior, academic performance, social relationships, and family functioning. In fact, the addition of behavioral therapy significantly helped with comorbid disorders. During their sessions, therapists teach their patients how to modify their undesirable behaviors, such as defiance and procrastination, and replace them with desirable behaviors, such as obedience and proactiveness. These same psychiatrists will work with parents to help better them in getting the best out of their students. Finally, biblical counseling is another way to help treat ADHD by working to encourage or correct the desires of the heart. Certified biblical counselor and pastor of Marcel Church, Matthew Russell, told me that something I think is super helpful to recognize is a balanced view, the integration of man. We are inner and outer man. We have emotions, we have a mind, we have a spirit. I do not think it's proper to separate us into an upper and lower story when we are meant to be holistic beings. Even with behavioral modification, we must also address, and this is what biblical counseling does, the personal responsibility to love. This is the highest ethic of Christianity. Simply put, biblical counseling is a great ally in accomplishing this ideal. It will teach patients and parents how to combat impulsivity and inattention for God's glory, rather than just the student's success. Thus fulfilling Ephesians 4:22-24, which states, "But you were taught with regard to your former ways of life, to put off the old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitudes of your minds, and to put on the new self, which is created to be like God in righteousness and holiness." It does so by fulfilling 1 Corinthians 9:27. "But I discipline my body and I make it my slave, so that when I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified." Refusing treatment options, be they prescription medications, behavioral therapy, or biblical counseling, is like building a house upon sand. When the storm comes, it will eventually fall. ADHD is a threat to the academic success of the American student. It exists. It is a problem. It needs treatment. While definitions and diagnostic procedures may come into question, the evidence presented today suggests that millions of children suffer with this learning disorder. Though some patients have delegitimized it through their illicit use and distribution of study drugs, others should not have to face their consequences. Children and adolescents who forego the necessary treatments may face a complicated future plagued with academic problems, obesity, substance addiction, among a myriad of others. The proven success rate of medication when combined with behavioral therapy or biblical counseling will equalize that student and set them up for success. However a patient chooses to do it, the absolute worst thing that can be done for ADHD is nothing at all. So do something. Parents, get your children the help they need, and students accept it. Encourage one another, push one another to grow, have the uncomfortable conversations, and love as Christ loves you, actively. God has given us the ability to learn far and above that of any other created being. All knowledge points back to him and his divinity and his sovereignty. Do not let the label of a learning disorder dictate your life. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Scott. That's a great question. The question is that ADHD overdiagnosed? So there was a lot of research that I couldn't fit into here, and that was some of it. That was actually part of the title of Dr. Manos' article, ADHD overdiagnosed and overtreated, or misdiagnosed and mistreated. And there is some evidence that perhaps ADHD is overdiagnosed. That would be when doctors are using it as a fallback term instead of, getting the correct testimony, getting the correct, asking the correct questions, just saying, oh, you have ADHD, sending them off with some Adderall and saying, hope this makes you better. So yes, there is a lot of potential that ADHD is overdiagnosed. Does that answer your question? Okay. Grace. That's a great question. So the question is, what do I think has caused the rising rates of ADHD? There's a myriad of things. As Kate discussed, social media, I think, has had a huge impact on our brains, perhaps more than we may think. We are, as a generation, more and more distracted than ever. However, I also think it's simply that there has been a lot more research and a lot more testing done on ADHD, such that now it is becoming evident that a lot more children do have it. So it might even be that children and adolescents have been suffering with ADHD for millennia, and nobody knew. They just thought that they were miscreants or intellectually incapable. But now it's actually coming to light. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
Don't believe in it, they don't think I need it,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
they're denying, like, I
Mhm.
tried, or like, I don't need that,
That's a phenomenal question. Do I believe that older generations deny ADHD because it wasn't mainstream in their time? Is that the question? So I do think that could be part of the problem. Simply, yes, that was a bit outside the scope of my research. However, I think it's twofold, yes and no. I've had conversations with elderly people who would scoff at the idea of ADHD, and then I've had conversations in my research, for example, with my grandpa, and he was saying, "Oh, absolutely, this is absolutely real." He didn't try to say, "No, why are you studying this? It's not real. It's just pride." When I discussed the issue of denial, he said, "No, why would you deny it?" Does that answer your question? Mercy.
From a biblical perspective, do you think that ADHD could be treated with just more attention from parents, comfort of the Holy Spirit, the recognition that it might be just an attack from the enemy, instead of prescribing medicine just to send them on their way, like in place of?
Absolutely, yes. So the question is it should we could we look at ADHD in a much more biblical light, utilizing what the Holy Spirit has given us instead of prescription medication? That is where a lot of the issue of denial comes in. You can. I think it's a bad idea, to be totally honest with you. There's a lot of potential once you reach higher education. A student can pretty much fake their way through a lot of high school, especially public education today, with ADHD, and I've seen that with a lot of my friends. And I've seen a lot of my friends get to college and fail. I've seen friends lose tens of thousands of dollars in scholarships because of untreated ADHD. So you can, and I would actually encourage going to scripture first, but don't let that be the only thing. Does that answer your question? Okay. I've got an online question.
We have from an online user. They ask, could parenting practices such as lack of attention add to symptoms of ADHD?
That's a great question. So could lack of parent attention add to symptoms of ADHD? Absolutely. A lot of the patterns that we set in our youth stick with us into our adolescence and young adulthood. So it is a medical disorder. However, I think it could start young. For me, it started when I was in second grade, and I was able to fake my way through until I got to high school, and then then it got a little iffy. So, but could it? I would have to say that's a little bit outside the scope of my research, but my opinion would be that it could, but it's not the main route. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Next up is Luke Gadapee. He has been here since 4B, and he's planning to go to trade school and join the JEA after graduation. Without further ado, this is Trade Schools, the investment that pays.
Since we were kids, we were all asked the same question. What do you want to do when you grow up? A teenager who has not thought that far yet will say, I don't know, but I'll probably figure it out when I go to college. But you'll never hear them say, I want to find the best trade school that fits me. Going to college is widely accepted as the next point in a teenager's life after graduation, but trade school could be a better fit for them and they won't even know. The shift from vocational education has been a constant change and is now in full effect. The best starting point to look at is the GI Bill, which was created after World War II and gave younger veterans the ability to go to college on the government's money. Through the GI Bill, over 8 million veterans went to college in just the first 10 years. This was just a start to young adults being funneled into colleges. As these young adults returned from war, they were sent to a path of college and not vocational work, and this caused the decline of people filling trades. Another instance was after the Vietnam War, when the schooling changed and there was no more drive for kids to go to college. The main reason why vocational high schools was on a decline was that they no longer had a direct connection to their employers, and this made it harder for companies to find well-educated candidates. After both these wars, a leap was taken, which left vocational schools forgotten and unutilized by many. Now, as a few remaining tradesmen get old and new workers are required to take their spot, a large deficit has emerged. Those who had been on the path for tradesmanship have instead been rerouted to college educations. Trades are a necessary job, but there's no one to fill those jobs as of right now. To put the deficit in perspective, Gretchen Fraz of PBS states, the National Association of Manufacturing has warned that 2.4 million manufacturing jobs can go unfilled between now and 2028. And this is just in the manufacturing sector. This is not taking into account general contracting trades like electricians and plumbers. But to give a bit of clarification, when I say going to trade school, I mean going to vocational school or trade school, what is intended is a place where one learns about general contracting, such as being a plumber or electrician. When referring to college, what is meant is a 4-year degree in any type of major. Now, some in the audience may be asking, what does trade school have to do with me? Why should I not go to college and get a degree with why should I not go to college and get a job with that degree? Where you go after high school could set the standard for the rest of your life. Some of you may not also want to go to college because they're done with school. That's why I don't want to go. That's why I want to become a tradesman. Everyone has a different set of God-given skills, and those skills may not be utilized in college, and they could be used as a tradesman. For many people, education and tradesmanship with a focus on career is much more desirable than an academic education with a focus on getting a degree. In my speech, I'll address the illogical decisions of going to college without having a clear major or goal in mind. I will then segue into a comparison between college and trade school. Finally, I will point out the effect of high school graduates picking college over trade schools and what it does to manufacturing, and how doing so can be a misuse of a student's God-given gifts. Deciding on whether to go to college is an important decision. Many high school graduates go to college with the mindset that they will find what they want to do while in college, which will then translate into them getting a job afterwards. The start of one's college career should not be figuring out what they want to do while in college. Not only that, but once graduated, there is still no guarantee of a job. In an article for Simple Dollar, Trent Ham notes that the unemployment and underemployment rates for college graduates under the age of 25 are nearly double what they were in 2007. For the high prices that college demands, the number is much higher than it should be. Colleges are marketed as a jumpstart to one's future, but with the percentage on the rise, this might be a false advertisement. Furthermore, colleges do not require attendance to pick their major until their sophomore year, so this could leave tremendous amount of students stuck in college, not knowing what they want to do or with what they learn there. College is for high school graduates who want to learn about a field they can be better equipped when pursuing their career. College is not a buffering zone for high school graduates to spend thousands of dollars to get a major in a field they are not interested in or that has a limited job prospect afterwards. Going to college is a serious step and one that needs to be thoroughly considered before taking. In an interview with Brett McKay, Mike Rowe, a famous TV show host who followed blue-collar workers, gave his insight as to why blue-collar work is so necessary and why college should not be the only thing on a high school graduate's mind. Rowe has experience in both college and vocational schooling, and he has seen how the change in both can affect the economy. In his interview, Rowe says, "You have people with 4-year degrees up to their eyeballs in debt, working an office job that they hate, and barely making ends meet." Rowe knows both sides of the argument, and he wants young adults to start off the rest of their life in the real world on the right foot. There's no guarantee for a job after college if you pick a major with little need for workers, and that money spent acquiring that degree could be wasted. Rowe has been the most vocal about high school graduates going right to college, and he is right. The deficit has continued to expand, needs to be stopped and reduced. Picking a degree is a hard task for many students. It entails deciding how the rest of your life will be spent. College offers a wide variety of different majors for its attendees to pick from, but many of these are throwaways and have little job opportunity after college. To return again to Rowe, he says that going to college, picking a major, carrying out all the necessary requirements all lead to a cubicle job. There's no wiggle room for those that pick a major and then realize that it's not truly what they want to do. A common major is liberal arts. Liberal arts opens up the doors to become a journalist or an editor, but with the number of people that pick that degree, it is oversaturated. A major detriment to college is the large number who attend, and with the few of those that receive degrees who will actually get a job in the line of work they majored in. For instance, Mike Rowe has a liberal arts degree, but he says, "It's not that a liberal arts degree is bad. I've got one. It serves me well. I got mine in 1984. It cost me $12,000. I get the same degree from the same school, and it costs $85,000. Rowe's almost a traitor to his liberal arts degree. In some ways, he used it to tell people, "Don't go to college." But that is why Rowe is such an influential person when it comes to picking trades. As a more personal example, my sister Gabby spent 4 years at Moody Bible Institute and received a degree in counseling. That is what she decided to pursue in hopes that she could help others. But sadly, Gabby does not use her degree. She works at a coffee shop. It is disheartening to see someone work so hard for 4 years just to get a job they could apply for with a high school diploma. Not every degree is going to be worthless, though. Many of them seem to be filler degrees for students that went to college too quickly and were left with a useless achievement. I've talked about college and trade schools and how one is more beneficial than the other, but there are many important characteristics that needs to be expressed. First, the price difference between the two is exponential. The normal price for attending in-state college is from around $9,400 per year for almost 4 years. In contrast, a trade school from 13 to 18 months costs around $5,000 to $15,000 in total, according to Midwest Technical Institute. So if you think about it, that is $22,000 difference in schooling alone. And in addition, the short amount of time it takes for someone to complete trade school, that means that a tradesman could get a job and start making money before the college student is even a sophomore. In an interview with Bradley Langmaid, a trade school graduate and certified industrial mechanic, when asked the reason why he took trades over college, he says, the original investment was too little. Plus, there was no guarantee of a viable job placement and the lack of availability to have a job while in college. Later, when asked why Langmaid was drawn to trade school instead of college, he said, didn't want to go to classes anymore, reading more books, taking more worthless classes. That's another reason why they are so different. Colleges are focused on books, and for what? It's attendees to pick a cubicle job? But that's why trade schools are so opposite. They teach hard labor. like mechanics and electricians. They prepare them for real life work. Both sectors are needed in today's society, but not everyone who has a college degree has what's needed for society. College equips people to fill spaces in jobs that do not need to be filled, but with trade, employers are desperately looking for people to fill the jobs, but they have few applicants. College and trade schools are both needed to instruct the future of job holders, but trade schools need to be seen as just as a viable option to college graduates. But those who feel the effects of numerous young adults going to college are actually the manufacturers and trade-based companies. As college seemingly becomes the only option for graduates, the number of tradesmen are dwindling. The National Association says the problem of not being able to hire qualified workers is getting worse as the unemployment rate drops and the labor markets tighten and baby boomers retire. As workers become hard to find, certain areas of production will take a heavy hit. When I says why there is no one filling jobs, manufacturers say they're forgotten and almost never considered as the next step for many high school graduates. A cheaper and more impactful line of work is sitting right there waiting for people to fill it, but there's no one to take that step. These jobs are necessary, but they're also harder and take more time to get adept and work better at it. Manufacturing jobs like welding and machine production require more attendance and more development of their skills. In a short book, David Ellis, a lawyer turned mechanic, pointing out the need for mechanics. The automobile industry needs technicians, while development continues of the production of entirely autonomous, self-driving cars. No one has yet made a car that can repair itself. Think about this. You ever been on vacation and your car's broken down? How long did it take you to get it fixed? I assume right away. But it was done by a skilled mechanic who knew what was wrong with your car. He fixed it in a timely manner. But what if there were multiple mechanics on one car? After the car was fixed, the bill showed how much that single mechanic work cost for his work. Think of how much cars break all the time. And there needs to be people to fix those cars, but they're thinning out. This deficit has grown, but not just in the manufacturing. Tradesmen such as electricians and plumbers are also feeling the lack of new tradesmen since they have no one to fill their spot. There will always be a trade job opportunity, but with so many students now going to college, there might not be anyone to take those openings. So think about this. When describing trades, Indeed, the career job website, says trade jobs are an excellent option for steady income with several career paths depending on your skill set and interests. These jobs offer unrivaled job security, lower student debt, a number of job prospects, and opportunity to pursue a rewarding career. There are millions of jobs available, but they are left unfilled because working in trades does not have the marketability of colleges. These jobs are open, but those who would fill them go to college and do not fulfill the calling that God has equipped them for. Each and every one of us has a certain set of God-given skills, and we need to use those skills in a certain way. In 1 Peter, it says how we should use what God has given us. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's very grace. We are made with a plan in mind, and to not use that gift is not what God would want. God's gift gives us, as his people, to utilize what he gives us for his glory. Especially in the Bible, it stresses the work we do for God is to be the highest quality. Colossians 3, it says, whatever you do, work heartedly, as not for the Lord and not for man, as for the Lord and not for man. Don't hit. Blaspheme. Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. This passage is very expressive as that the gifts that we are working for all point to God. God made each and every one of us with gifts, and we need to be open to use those gifts for his glory. But, in contrary to my point, according to a statistic given by Shanna Juber in an article for Northeastern, they say 86% of college graduates consider their job a stepping stone for their career, while only 57% of those high school graduates can say the same. The majority of bachelor's degree holders, which is 60%, say that they are highly satisfied with their job, and it's more than just a paycheck. But this does not take into account how long it took the degree holders to find a job in their sector. Also how much it costs to receive a college degree, and having nearly half the graduates say that they are not satisfied with their job is not a win for colleges. They argue that some students go to college to receive their associates, which takes less time because that is all their desired field requires. They say college provides a place for people to learn about their interests, and along with that, enables them to pursue that interest in the future. They make the case that not attending college in multiple ways lessens the opportunity that present themselves in the future. So by not going to college, you're doing a disservice to yourself by having everyone go to college. But having everyone go to college and rack up debt to fill low-level jobs is setting those who would have just attended trade school in debt for no reason. Now the point is made is how the pay for those with a degree is much higher than one with a trade school certificate. However, having a degree adds to the marketability of an employee because they put so much work into getting it. But the case for getting a degree is an increase in pay and a greater chance for going further in a job. But the time and money spent getting that degree has already set the degree holder back on average $22,000. I'm looking for a welding job in Florida, and on Indeed, it shows that skilled welders can make up to $17 an hour. Now, to put that number into perspective, after spending 8 months in trade school and learning to weld at a cost of $6,000, over the course of time, it would take for a college degree holder, the welder would have already made $90,000, and the college graduate would not even have a job yet after graduation. There will be a need for degrees in some jobs, and it comes to the money and time that will be saved. Sorry. But when it comes to the money and time that will be saved, the pros outweigh the cons. But when looking at the big picture, trade schools are set with a purpose to create workers to fill the jobs that are needed, but they're overshadowed by colleges because of the notion that college is the only way to get more money. If our negative attitude towards trades remains, work sectors such as manufacturing and industrial jobs will falter, could lead to a detrimental shortage. High schoolers have been told that going to college, paying $9,000 a year with money they don't have, is how adult life is begun. But in all reality, they could be saving thousands of dollars and starting much earlier. They choose trades. With trades, you are trained for a specific skill, which will then be utilized in the job you choose. In college, you take filler classes to fulfill the amounts of hours the college requires you. College is not for everyone, because the gifts we have received from God are different in each and every one of us. Trades are what I want to pursue after I graduate, and many of my classmates are choosing the college route. But they know what they want to do. They are on the path that God has set them out for. But no, to all listening, don't just go to college because you think you'll find what you want to do there. Think about your future. Make the decision on what you want to do in life and take initiative. So I'll ask you again, what do you want to do when you grow up? Thank you. Questions? In the back. So the question is, what if your parents are pushing you to go to college and not go to trade school? Well, before I got put on trades, my dad actually said, you're going to college because of the way that he experienced college, and he doesn't want me to turn out like him. Working his life, like, hard work. But I cannot stand school. And you can't just say, I don't want to go to school. You have to think about, you have to find the right place to go, how to look at all the different opportunities and create a good, I know this is putting a lot on you, but you have to come up with a good argument for how trade schools are a better option than college. Does that answer your question?
So what if you got a bright future friend?
So he's asking, what if you get a bright futures? So this comes down to, do you want to go to college? Because if you have bright futures, that's great. If you can go for no money, go ahead. But you also have to think, do you want to go to college? Do you think that just because that money is there, you want to go? Or are you going because your parents say so or something like that? So with trade schools, it's a job, so you're getting paid to go there. So you could either pay to go somewhere for free or with your bright futures, or you could go to a job and get started either way. So it's kind of a judgment call. So do you want to keep going, or do you want to start on another track? Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes, sir.
So I went to a vocational high school, and so there was
Good.
value in taking some of those hands-on courses. Do you think that there would be value in PEP offering perhaps like a vocational overview course, where you could get hands-on experience in electricity, mechanics, so the different vocational fields?
So the question is, do you think PEP should start? Do you think PEP should start like teaching vocational schools? Is that
But just provide an overview. And
Oh.
good for folks that might not come from that background.
so? Like get them educated.
Yeah, just show them what the career field might be.
So the question is, how do you think, or the way that PEP is made, do you think they should show trade schools to their students? So with PEP, it's a college preparatory system. So I think that would be like kind of like the red wave in America trying to stop communism from spreading secretly. So personally, I think that they should, because like I came since Core B. I've come here since Core B, and I kind of started looking into trades in Core E. But with there is a big possibility that they, like, I figured out that I wanted to become, like, I started getting the idea in physics class with Miss M, because I learned about electricity and I wanted to like follow that. But trade schools is like, it does need to be pushed on, well, not pushed on the people, but like people do need to be informed. And so I think that if they did, that would be a great service to their students. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
This is not a question, but there is something called PEP Works that is now offered, and it's primarily out of Ohio. They're men, and maybe women, I don't know, but men who have trade careers, and they're willing to mentor PEP students who are interested in those careers. So it's called PEP Works.
There you go. So she asked, what is like the long-term benefits of trade school? So with trades, they're very good with their workers. Like JEA, I know that they are very like you work a certain amount of time. Like if I started in JEA right now, I'm 18. I could retire at 50. So they pay very well. They set you up very well. And so it's all just finding about the right job and the right company that will like care for you after you've worked for them and put in the time. Does that answer your question? And that is all. Sorry for those who had questions. We'll take a 5-minute break. Now presenting, we have Zoey Slack. She has been here since 4A, and she plans to go to Maryville in the fall with a scholarship in volleyball. So now, a constitutional right for a censorship slight.
Are you the kind of person that likes others to make decisions for you, or do you like to be in control? I believe the answer is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, even if you like to be controlled somewhat, there's still a part of you making that decision at least. But what if I told you there was an extreme in which you weren't even aware you were being controlled in the first place? Americans are unknowingly being constantly controlled today and abandoning original ideals upon which their nation was based. America was founded and based on ideals new to society and the world: equality, rights, liberty, opportunity, and democracy. The roots of America were dug deep in the Christian belief system, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. In the past, opposing viewpoints were welcomed and differing opinions valued. Even things that were hard to hear were protected under individual rights. But today, things have changed. Only one view is acceptable. Schools had referred to the Bible as the foundation of truth and how to teach correctly and wisely. But now they have shifted to evolution as the foundation for learning. Sin, instead of God, has become the mentor of life and how to live it to the fullest. Feelings are now the ultimate guide in decisions and direction. Founding principles, cornerstone ideals, constitutional enforcement, and fundamental unity are all crumbling at the hands of society. America has established in the Constitution freedom of speech as a right to every citizen and promises no censoring of beliefs. And this has become a problem today because Americans are lacking a voice if they don't support the narrative of today's dominant society. Because of this failing system to incorporate everyone's view, primarily one side is heard, leading to a lack of perspective. The media perfectly illustrates this major defect. Media outlets are traditionally led and staffed by individuals on the political spectrum, leaning towards the expression of a select viewpoint. And those are only the news outlets. Social media outlets are nearly all controlled by the young people on these apps, often providing one point of view. And many times people who defer an opinion are either silenced or don't speak up in the first place. This nation's safety, integrity, and unity are at large. I don't say this lightly. Every day something new happens in life, whether it's a conversation with a stranger, a tragedy, a joyous moment. Any kind of altercation can alter one's perspective and worldview. Whether it's realized or not, people are influenced easily, especially by the constant one-sided opinions that the media displays. There's a difference between respecting each other and voicing opinions and just throwing your ideals down someone's throat. Whether it's realized Okay, the problem with society that's developing today is that many don't even receive or hear what the other is saying. How can we make informed decisions based on such a lack of listening? And what happens is, in the end, no side heard, no knowledge earned. Secular society almost encourages this with the fact that they don't hide their utter distaste for another opinion. Secularists have their views and they consistently express the acceptance of everyone, but oftentimes this is proven to be false. Mainstream archetypes persistently state certain ideologies through the promotion in commercials, ads, social media outlets, etc., that they have this all-encompassing acceptance for everyone. However, they are pushing an inconsistent sense of safety. And the problem is, so many are buying into the safety net, but when they fall, it'll be too late to realize the true damage done. So the First Amendment of the Constitution makes freedom of speech one of the foundational freedoms of the American citizen. Partial truths of modern society have resulted in a censoring of this right for individuals whose worldview differs from the dominant culture. In this speech, I will discuss the foundations of that freedom. I will then show how that is under attack. And finally, I will reiterate the importance of truth in a society that values it less and less. The constitutional Christian principles on which this nation was based clearly state that freedom of speech is a right not to be censored. The First Amendment of the Constitution also strictly prohibits the suppression of religious liberty. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. The First Amendment offers protection against the government overtaking the opportunity to speak freely. Our founders built America upon the foundation of such ideals that the government would never get to the point of interference in the people's voice and their rights. A National Review article reminds that the First Amendment ensures that even things that we find offensive should find protection. The government cannot compel us to silence. Author Jay Koss states, our First Amendment freedoms combine freedom of religion, of assembly and petition, of press and speech, give us the right to think what we like and say what we please. And if we, the people, are to govern ourselves, we must have these rights, even if they are misused by a minority. This is crucially significant because even if one may not be interested or in agreement with another in their worldview, it is still a right to be able to speak freely and discuss with others. We gain much from deliberation with others, and to shut out even the minutest detail of what they may say because they defer an opinion keeps us in ignorance. This doesn't just concern opinion in politics, but also religion and the expression of it, which is a right not to be prohibited. As stated by the Legal Information Institute at Cornell Law, the First Amendment forbids Congress from both promoting one religion over others and also restricting an individual's religious practices. It guarantees freedom of expression by prohibiting Congress from restricting the press or the rights of an individual to speak freely. The First Amendment offers the necessary means in which to be able to equally express in any way and assemble for any religion or practice we engage in. As Philip Hammond in the book With Liberty for All keenly writes, it is rather that the American government, which in governing what must judge what is and is not religiously permissible, is itself required to remain agnostic or secular. The government's impartiality towards freely exhibiting one's faith or worldview is a necessity. The neutrality required of the government does not include a leniency or a preconditioned scripted outcome. Many believe, however, that attaining false information is too easy, and censorship is a necessity. G.T. Marks, an International Encyclopedia of Social and Behavioral Sciences, talks about how some censorship is largely symbolic, offering a way to enhance social solidarity by avoiding shared insults. It may be a form of moral education, as with prohibitions on racist and sexist speech. Censoring of certain truths can be seen as beneficial in numerous ways. The lack of communicative threats in concern to violence, hate, politics, religion, and so on. The withholding of opinions and information can become a trivial component to keeping peace and assuring that impressionable people aren't misled. With this censorship, one can voice their own personal truths and lack the persistent slander and retaliation to it. An article written by Tony Fauchery, an Australian leading speaker and writer on mind, body, health, empowerment mentions, whilst one not need to die for his truth, since we have become liberated from oppressive societal ideology, realizing your truth represents the highest act of authenticity one can attain. There can be so much more to gain by the inner peace and personal truths rather than using truths defined by society. It can be beneficial for many media outlets to censor their users in order to benefit them and their users. And as a result, they have to claim a certain narrative that may or may not be what they actually believe. And with that in perspective, it comes to the suppressive half-truths, one could say, or the full truth uncensored. This clearly shows that hazy judgment caused by falsehood can easily be a problematic result of suppressive media outlets, news articles, courtrooms, and shifted truth in general. The involvement of the First Amendment is annihilated in the censorship of the courts of justice. The minority's over-abuse of free speech is an infringement of the rights of all peoples of America originally constitutionalized. For example, an article for BBC News presents the case of a baker in Colorado and his right to refuse to bake a wedding cake for a homosexual couple because of his Christian belief between a man and a woman. What a concept. The state ruled against him, that decision had violated Mr. Phillips' rights. The report continues. The Supreme Court's majority opinion said that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission had been biased against Mr. Phillips. Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote that while Colorado law can protect gay persons in acquiring products and services, the law must be applied in a manner that is neutral towards religion. In this instance, the smaller court of Colorado had made a devastatingly unjust ruling, which the Supreme Court had to overturn. The Colorado State Court utilized their small standing to try to make a prejudiced, unlawful ruling against the religious baker. Mr. Phillips had the right to refuse to make the wedding cake for the gay couple because it stood in conflict with his beliefs. The couple falsely brought this case to the suppressive court of law. This attempted suppression of religion by the lower court rings loud and clear and creates a shifty foundation for battling anything in America, whether it be politics, religion, or ethnicity. By attempting to silence voices with which we disagree or religious ideas we find offensive, we lose the ability to discuss, debate, and learn from another. Americans cannot stand down in fear that they may be admonished for their perspective. Another article by the National Review, written by James Koss, reminds us of founding father James Madison's view that the Constitution could divide power this way and that, but in the end, it's the people, and only the people, who rule. And for the people to rule wisely, they have to be able to communicate with each other freely and without fear of reprisal. People's deliberation over varying ideologies is what this nation is all about. But now there's a preconditioned censoring taking place. This restriction of freedom takes form in not just court, but also media outlets, which have programmed the tone in which America is to speak. Many of these media outlets are governed by powerful individuals or companies that have a scripted narrative. Only a handful of companies rule the media and censor what people hear, which results in a mainstream ideology that they choose. This is a problem because, according to a tech news article, objectivity in journalism is an illusion created by the elite class to give the appearance of balanced news. However, there's no such thing as unbiased news. The rehearsed sketch reigns as the only truth, and it's becoming widely accepted all over this nation. In an interview with Erica Anderson, who has written for several national news publications and worked in national politics, she stated that news reporting should include all of the relevant facts, even if inconvenient to their narrative. With a preconceived bias, they may not even simply be noticing the inconvenient facts because they are searching for ones that will fulfill their narrative. However, for too many, the narrative is all that matters. One instance would include the editorial page editor of the New York Times from May 2016 to June 2020, who in essence deferred in the views from the overarching paper's perspective and respectfully resigned, with an editor's note added afterwards saying, "We have concluded that the essay fell short of our standards and should not have been published." The paper had a preconditioned idea of the political stance in which he needed to take on issues. He wrote against them, and he was shunned because of it. In an article written by Bruce Herring, PMC Associate News Editor, wrote how in February, Amazon seemingly refused to sell a certain children's book that questioned the transgender ideology. And Herring wrote saying, Amazon was openly signaling to conservative Americans that their views were not welcome on its platforms. They found it apparently offensive to the transgender children movement. However, Amazon has not commented on the removal of it or the explanation thoroughly backing their reasoning either. This is a complete insubordination. By authorizing this restriction, Amazon is protecting one viewpoint, the transgender secular one. It is just the start to the silencing of an opposing view. If Amazon, a major company that massively sells and quickly delivers almost anything, determines not to carry something, then who or what will? This restriction promotes America's calamity, and as a result, the freedom of truth and rights has thus become a modified version of itself. It extinguishes foundational liberties. According to authors William Wines and Terence Slough, not only silences critics, but restricts the flow of information in order to modify their behavior or conform their opinions. This screening of information is insidious and undermines what it means to be a free people in the democratic sense. The withheld information isn't what's protected by the First Amendment. It's the protection from the interference with it, and that's what's being abused today. The constitutionalized principles with which the United States of America was founded are being restrained and roped down by the corporations that proclaim a false sense of truth, which is truth as only they see it. Today, truth has become relative in belief and unscriptural by definition. In the simplistic components that construct the foundations of truth, one must remember that partial truth isn't truth at all. In Florida's courts, when testifying, each witness shall declare that he or she will testify truthfully by taking an oath or affirmation in substantially the following form. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? This is key because they emphasize the whole truth, implying that half a truth isn't truth in its essence. It's a version of it or part of it. And in this, part of the truth is then left out, completely changing the argument, the understanding, and the purpose of said truth in the first place. One example of this fault is shown in the following article pulled from the Medium, a motivational, accredited magazine. Living your truth must come to represent that which is true for you alone, unhindered by outside influences. Once the mental facade has been transformed, the truth gives way to the light of your being. This isn't all they had to say, however. They continued also by saying that it's not necessary to program oneself with the truth, it's only necessary to remove that which is false. They specifically state how they have no need for the truth. They just remove what they don't want to be true so that they don't have to face the facts of it. This is so faulty because the scriptural foundations of all reason are diminished by accepting this concept. As Christians, we should be searching for understanding in the Bible, which stresses the truth and its importance to no end. Scripture rids any doubt from the mind by proclaiming the priority of truth. For instance, even those opposed to Jesus came to him and said, "Teacher, we know you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth." and do not care what anyone thinks, for you are not partial to anyone. He is truthful and teaches in the way of truth. He is not partial. That needed to be said again, to point out that he bases truth not on the fractured nature of it, but by the genuine fact reliability that it promises. Considering that to be partially true is to be false. What is the reason the other half is being thrown out? Simply because the argument cannot be met. There can be no justice without the basis of truth, because there'd be no point at which to argue. God created this earth, establishing truth as the basis of reasoning and the very foundation of justice. Psalm 119 states that the sum of your word is truth, and every one of your righteous rules endures forever. Truth is the core of justice, and with only a half-truth being utilized as the structure for an argument, it will fail. With the lack of truth present, relative truth becomes the premise. And in today's society, there's no usurping the new explanation of truth. Truth is now less absolute and depends on the person's perspective as a point of definition. According to the author Lynette Schaefer, it is evident that we are living in times when absolute truth is no longer regarded as the basis for a statement or lifestyle. Truth is no longer an absolute. It is now a relative term used to suit the whims of many people and their personal opinions, lifestyles, or private interpretations. The secular, God-dishonoring new ideology that America is now attempting to promote is failing drastically. Whether it be the fact that many have sex prior to marriage, gender is fluid, truth is fluid, and everything is to honor man instead of God. To put it simply, truth is now open for interpretation, varying from person to person. That is the severe state in which America finds itself. And when it lowers its standards to incomplete truths instead, the whole truth, the whole nation's identity and sense of safety will shatter. The First Amendment's promise to protect an individual's rights to practice religion and freedom has been forsaken in modern society. The censorship broadcasted all day, every day across America has formed a false sense of truth. And this is detrimental because it has Americans broke in the sense of finding themselves lacking rich in truth. People are entitled to their own opinion, not their own facts. The dumbfounded nature that the one-sided media insults people with creates an uninformed nation as a whole. This contradicts what Scripture teaches about truth, for it states, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." To be discerning and to remain true in the biblical sense will prove to be so much more value than succumbing to the whims of society's fallacy. The United States today are straying so far from the truth of the Bible, and it's crumbling ever so quickly. Its results will be lethal. So it's up to you. Expand the perspective, endure the hardships promised, and remain true to the word, or become a walking corpse, counter to the bores and falsehoods of society. Thank you. Questions? No questions? Okay. No questions. Okay. We're here. Yeah.
So, as an example, former President Trump decided to share his opinion on Twitter, and as a result, Twitter blocked his account. So even if this is a violation of his free speech, Twitter is a private company. While Trump has his rights, Twitter also has the rights to their media. So how would you draw the line between personal rights and private company rights?
Okay, so your question was, so for private and public companies, there's different rights, of course, associated with each. And how do you find the line? Like, for example, you give the example of Twitter and Donald Trump and how he got removed from it. I actually thought he was in my research as well. I was going to include that, but it just didn't seem as strong of an evidence. But in that instance, especially, I looked up the reasoning as to why he was removed, and it wasn't a logical reasoning. And that's what's being used as a foundation for a reason these days. And they're twisting so many things they call facts to represent. They're twisting a lot of things and they're using them to represent facts, and it's not holding up. And in that sense, in the Twitter removing Donald Trump, it was violating his rights in so many aspects because, yes, they are a private company, but the reasons that they gave associating the removal of him were not supported by the First Amendment in any sense. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I'm going in circles. Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So what should people's response be if they're not allowed to voice their opinion?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so he asked, what should people's response be if they can't voice their opinions on social media? So a lot of people like social media because of the fact that you can voice opinions. You have a platform for people to see your opinions, but it is your opinion. And yes, it's nice to find people who agree with you, and it's nice to find like a kind of community in that sense. But is your opinion changed because you posted it on there, or is it still the same if you didn't broadcast it? Exactly. So does your opinion change? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you consider, you're saying that the world today is based mainly on half-truth and lies. Would you consider the Constitution a half-truth, considering the men who wrote it only believe everything they're writing down?
Oh, gosh. Okay. That's a very good question. So your question was, in my thesis, I discussed how a lot of this nation's truths today are based on half-truths instead of full truths, and whether or not the Constitution or the writers of the Constitution even agreed with their. I'm sorry. Can you rephrase the question?
Right. So in the Constitution, they say that all men are equal, they all have the right to voice their opinion. But they didn't believe all people had that same right. Many of them owned slaves and thought of them as lesser. So would you count that as a half-truth, or like?
No, that's a very good question. So her question was, because of, like I said, in my thesis I discussed about half-truths and how our nation's basing it off of that, and the fact that she even brought up a very good point that in the beginning a lot of the writers of the Constitution even based what they were saying off of half-truths, because like she said, a lot of them did have slaves, and a lot of them may have seen some different races and colors as more elite than others in that time frame. But I don't want to answer this question, and so it was a little bit outside of the scope of my research, but no, I'm still gonna answer. I'm still trying to like. Okay. I think that at least what they were trying to accomplish was more important than maybe what they thought was their intention was better than what they may have actually believed or thought, because it did create such a unity in America, at least for an extended period of time. And we did get rid of slaves. We have progressed in so many aspects of life. So just because that they based it maybe on a half-truth, they were still aiming for a better goal, and I think that's more important. Any other questions? Okay.
Do you think that the Constitution should be like amended very like deeply and thoroughly over the course of time? Because like the Constitution, like it's like other countries, they amend their own constitutions a very good amount of the time, like every 5 years, something. I don't really know the exact time period, but like that. For example, like the firearms one. Back in when they wrote the Constitution, firearms were very different back then. So do you think that like some of these aspects of the Constitution should be changed given the time period, how we progressed as a society?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. So she asked, okay, I'm trying to find a way to rephrase it. So she asked basically, should we rewrite the Constitution every 5 years or however amount of time? Because like a lot of people say today, the Constitution should be living and breathing. But I would have to say I disagree with that in every sense, just because, yes, things change in society, but the values are still the same. They have not changed. Are all men created equal with unalienable rights? Yes. Has that changed? You brought up the guns. Has that changed? Should we all have the right to bear arms? No, that has not changed. So I think that the base value is still consistent in any time period, and I think that's why it should not be rewritten.
How has this research and this thesis changed your view of how you're going to get involved with hopefully promoting the truth and free speech as well?
So your question was, how has this thesis basically changed my perspective on it and kind of encouraged me in a way to go out and actually do something about it, and what am I going to do about it, basically. So when I first started researching it, I was just kind of like, okay, like I see it in society, but then I started doing more and more research, and I realized that even my the evidences that I was going to give were censored in a way to fit a certain narrative. And that's kind of what made me sad, because I was believing it and I was so ready to find the scripted narrative. So I really want to, I guess, just discussing, because it's so hard to really broadcast things these days without it being seeming one-sided or people just trying to disregard what you're saying. So I think it really just comes to the thing of just talking to people and getting involved in different things that interact with so many different people. Because I'm trying to think of something that you could really do. You could get involved in politics, but I think with me, at least, I will just discuss with a lot of people, because I have learned to be able to discuss and come alongside of people and just talk and spread the truth. I guess that sounds bad, but that's the best way I can think of it.
It's fine. So I don't want anybody